Howdy, and welcome to another episode of Adult Onset Horsemanship. I'm your host, Daniel Dolphin.
Welcome to Season 2 of the Adult Onset Horsemanship Podcast. Good to be back. I've already done a few interviews for upcoming ones, but we'll start it off as always with a Q&A. Just a little housekeeping. I would ask that when y'all listen to these podcasts, if you enjoy them, go into whatever directory you're listening on and please give it a review or 5 stars or rate it or however that particular platform or directory sets it up. Those things really do help us to spread the word and share these with your friends and all of that. If you feel like you got something meaningful out of them, these really do take quite a bit of time. And so there comes a point at which you wonder whether the time is worth it if things aren't growing the way you'd like them to be. So please help us out. Also, where I get the questions from these podcasts is from my Facebook group, Bits, Spurs, and Good Sense, and also the emails and other avenues of questions that I receive and some of the real world stuff that I've done. We have a little mix of all of that for this episode. So the first question that we have got is a lady asking about a young horse that she's riding, and when she's been trail riding with a friend of hers, this young gelding of hers is riding right up the butt of the other horse. She does not want to get into a pulling on the reins tug of war with her young horse, and so she's wondering how else she could approach this problem. So always comes back to make the right thing easy and the wrong thing difficult. What is the right thing? Giving the horse some space. What's the wrong thing? Getting too close to the other horse. So there's a few ways I might approach this. One, if I had a friend that I trusted that had good timing and had a horse that was solid and we could accomplish this together, I might ask them to ride with a switch or a little dressage whip or something like that and kind of give my horse a little pop on the nose when he gets within range and use that as sort of the deterrent, the making the wrong thing difficult, getting my horse when he's getting too close to the other horse. Now, I understand that there are a lot of people that would not feel comfortable or confident riding a young horse while someone takes a swing at their nose. And so that's how I might approach it, but it certainly might not be how you would approach it. So if you aren't comfortable with that, or you don't have that friend with that solid horse that's willing to do this, I would say that you still need the friend and the horse, but they could be on a green horse as well. And in fact, we do this exercise at most of my clinics, and especially colt starting clinics. And I call it Buzz the Tower. And basically, if your horse is getting too close to your friend's horse, you're gonna start riding circles around your friend's horse, and they could continue walking. They could stop. I might, look for a nice open area to do this. If I'm in a real tight, thickly wooded area, that wouldn't be ideal. But if we come to a little clearing or something, I'm gonna start working my horse around their horse, and then go off away and rest, and then come back. If my horse is drawn back to their horse, I'm going to let him go, but then I'm going to start working him, trotting circles around that other horse, working him, a little bit of intensity. I want to make it difficult. Then we go away and we rest. Same thing if we're riding on the trail. We're going to start doing circles around that other horse. We're going to make it difficult. And then we're going to go away and we're going to rest. And we're going to show him there's a good place to be that's appropriate, and then there's a pain in the butt place to be that isn't appropriate. And you're going to have to just do this a certain number of times until your horse kind of gets the message. And you need to be diligent about it. Once you start working on this problem, you need to continue working on the problem. Don't let it go tomorrow and won't worry about it today. That is not helpful when training a horse. You need to have that consistency where this is always going to be difficult, or this is always going to be the correct thing, not a sometimes situation. we have another lady who has a horse, and I actually sold this horse to her, and I know him quite well. I really liked him a lot, but he's a second horse. Okay, so what I mean by that is oftentimes for people, we're looking for the safe, sound kids horse sort of a thing to let you build some confidence, and then at some point you outgrow that horse and you're ready to step up into something that's a little more high performance, a little more challenging, a little more sensitive, and that's what this horse is. He is not an open level competition horse, but he definitely has more sensitivity and gas and handle than what most people have ridden. And so she's out with him one day in the paddock, and she goes to leading him back, and he's feeling a little frisky and playing around, and he rears up on her on the way back. She notes that he hadn't been ridden for a couple of weeks in that case, and then she is asking me for advice on what she should have done. Now, what she did do is he reared up, resisting on the lead, basically pulling on her, and she immediately went to him with some intensity. So she kind of pushed him backwards when he wanted to go backwards, and backed him up kind of aggressively and snatched on the rope a little bit and made the wrong thing difficult, right? And I just have to say kudos to her. That was the perfect response, in my opinion. I know the horse, he's just feeling good, and she's got a few other videos of him kind of bucking and playing in the paddock, and that's what's going on. And everybody wants a horse that feels good. We all, we're spending good money on nutrition, and a lot of horses have a acupressurist and a chiropractor and an osteopath, and we've got the vets and good farriers, and we're doing all this to make this horse sound and feeling good. Well, one of the consequences of a horse that feels good is they like to play. They're feeling good, and it's like kids at recess sometimes if they're not getting adequate exercise. So be mindful of that. That's not a bad sign at all. I know this horse, he's not a rearer. He was just feeling good and feeling frisky, and it's okay to put them in their place once in a while and tell them, hey, I'm glad that you're feeling good, but you still need to settle down and remain under my control. And that's what she did. But just keep in mind, if you have a horse that is a little playful, is a little frisky, that is a sign that horse is feeling good, which is exactly what you've probably invested a fair chunk of change into. So don't be discouraged when you see the fruits of your labor and your efforts and your finances there. Recognize it for what it is. We have a little bit more complicated question here. This is about warming a horse up, and I have mentioned on the podcast several times about not loping a horse so much. And as it so happens, I had a conversation for the podcast just a few days ago in an interview with Miss Jack Ballou. And Jack is an absolute expert on physiology and wellness and biomechanics and rehabilitation and that sort of stuff. She has a very uncommon level of knowledge in those areas, and we were talking about this. I've said publicly before that I stopped loping my horses to warm them up. I don't lope near as much as I used to anymore, and that's not because I got lazier. I find that the trot is a far more effective gait for warming a horse up. It does actually stretch more muscles. It's a symmetric gait. And when I stopped loping so much, a lot of the health problems I was having, like hock injections, for instance, in the cutting horses, that stuff went down like 75%. It was night and day difference. Jack was saying, I won't spoil the whole interview with her, but basically that there are many studies that illustrate significant benefits to walking a horse for about 10 minutes before you begin any real exercise with them. And I'm also pretty big on talking about rider skills, things like feeling your horse's feet, going through some little drills and exercises there, working on contact, getting in rhythm with the horse, those sorts of things. That's a great thing to do with that 10 minutes at the walk. If you really took 10 minutes every time you rode your horse, and the first 10 minutes you focused on you getting with the horse and really feeling them and really getting in rhythm, I promise you in 6 months, you would be leveled up significantly. Particularly those of you that are maybe on a plateau, or you're kind of flirting with getting out of the beginner and into the intermediate level of stuff. The real difference there is your feel for the horse and knowing where the feet are and so forth. So there's nothing but benefit to spending 10 minutes dinking around, walking on your horse, and then maybe trotting a little bit or something to warming your horse up. It's good for them mentally, it's good for them physically, it's good for you as a rider. It's just good. She also asks in that question about footing for round pins and in wet and humid areas. I'm in South Louisiana. We are a very wet area. We get somewhere between 60 and 80 inches of rain a year. And so sand, washed sand, is my preference for round pins and arenas and stuff down here. I like a pretty decent base of it. So a round pin, probably 6 to 8 inches. I really do want it kind of deep for those young horses that might throw me on my old fat head. I want a little soft cushion for them to land. I also want them to work pretty hard when they get into those pins. So if I need to use their lungs to talk to their brain, that's available to me. I've had very, very good success with soundness and that sort of footing as well. I've definitely seen some horses that got on footing that was a little too slick, and they slipped, and it was a problem. You can mess stifles up with things like that. You can pull groins. You can have a horse slip, and that becomes a several months problem. So good, grippy, deep sand is certainly my preference there for a multitude of reasons. Now, you didn't necessarily ask about this, but just since you brought it up, there is some pretty solid research that for overall long-term soundness for horses, the best thing you can do is to ride them on varying terrains and turfs and surfaces and have them experience differences there. So different depths, different grippiness, some grass, some hard ground, some soft ground, some 2-inch fluff, some 6-inch deep. The more varied and the more regularly you can vary it, the better, essentially. I also would say that is pretty heavily dictated by what you're trying to do with the horse. So everything I've done has been pretty high performance with real heavy, hard, fast movements, hard stops, hard turns, and you do need that deeper ground and give that horse a little cushion, kind of slows them down into the ground. But if you're trying to barrel race or do like dressage, the deeper sand is going to be in your way. Reining, for instance, the horses don't slide in 6-inch deep sand; they actually stop. So the footing really should be determined somewhat on what discipline you're riding, what you're trying to do with the horse. But again, the more you can vary it, the better that is physically for that horse in terms of long-term soundness. We have another question on the differences in body language during some tasks. Different behaviors that might be inherent to different breeds. So, there really aren't differences between breeds or really even horses, mules, and donkeys in terms of body language. The body language is the same. The way the ears move, the pursing of the lips, the squinting of the eye, blinking, deep sighs, licking and chewing, raising and lowering of the head, cocking the leg. I mean, the same calming signals apply, the same threats and signals of aggression apply, the same signals of relaxation apply. You can turn a mule into a herd of horses or a horse into a herd of mules, and the horses and mules are all going to talk to each other the same. Donkeys, the same deal. Draft horses, thoroughbreds. It's a pretty universal language among all equids. That being said, like there are different characteristics among breeds, and even one of those old sayings in animal science is that there are greater differences within a breed than there are between breeds. So what that means is a lot of time within breeds we get into some line breeding of certain bloodlines. So for instance, if you go into the cutting world, there's really like 6 foundational sires, and dang near everything in that world is going to be some derivative of those horses. If you go into the Western pleasure horse world, that probably hasn't changed a whole lot in the last 30 or 40 years. The halter horse world, I'm sure Arabians and saddlebreds and just about every group has their certain niches, and I will say that there are often very strong characteristics within bloodlines. So for instance, a racing quarter horse and a racing thoroughbred, and maybe even a racing trotter or pacer or whatever like that, those horses are probably more similar than like a racing quarter horse and a Western pleasure quarter horse, because the bloodlines there have differed. They branched off a long time ago, and there really can be some significant differences even within cutting, like those 6 bloodlines. I'm not saying there's specifically 6, I'm just giving you a number there, but there are pretty significant differences there where you can really tell this filly is out of that stallion or that line or whatever. There are certain characteristics there that are pretty dependable. So, are there differences between horses? There are. This is one of those things that I am a little privileged on, because I do get to travel a lot and I see a lot of different breeds. There are not many breeds that I haven't been able to lay my hands on and play with for a little while. So there are certainly horses that tend to be earlier maturing or move certain ways. So for instance, like the Baroque, the Iberian type horses, they have a way of moving that's definitely different than quarter horses, which is definitely different than Tennessee Walkers or Pasafinos or whatever. So there are temperament differences. So like Arabians kind of have that stereotype of being sort of hot-minded, hot-blooded. Thoroughbreds kind of the same way. So when you look at things generally and overall, yes, there are differences among horses. Is the body language different? No, they still talk to us pretty much the same way. You still judge actions and what the horse literally did more than anything else. But there are definitely differences. One of the things I know I've talked about a little bit is like pain tolerance. There's a lot of talk around now, especially with the biomechanics and all of this stuff toward rehabbing horses. I've heard it 1,000 times about how stoic horses are and how they don't show pain. Well, that is a generally true statement, but there are many exceptions to it, of horses that are absolute weenies and they don't have any tolerance for pain whatsoever. So like the spectrum there of horses that are pretty tough versus ones that are weenies, it's a pretty broad spectrum. So they are not all tough, they are not all stoic. They're generally stoic, but there's a pretty large chunk of exceptions to rules like that. So the best thing you can do always, in my opinion, is judge the individual. I would give a similar answer. People like, do you prefer to ride geldings or mares? Well, my personal horse, Curly, is what I would describe as a fairly feminine gelding. I've got another filly coming up to replace him, Willow. Willow is a masculine female. What most geldings are like, or what most mares are like, is completely irrelevant compared to the one you're riding. So judge the one you're actually riding and what that particular animal is like. What most of them are like really isn't relevant. Might give you the direction to look in, but there definitely are exceptions, and you need to be judging the reality in front of you, not the generalities, that stereotypes that we tend to have. So I did a clinic recently, and I had a lady that contacted me beforehand, and this was supposed to be kind of a basic to intermediate day that she was asking about. And she had a horse that only had like 8 rides, and she was wondering if it would be appropriate to bring that horse to the clinic. So let's talk about that a little bit, because I have had this happen more often than I would have ever thought. My basic response to her was that if she were going to ride this horse pretty much every day between now and the clinic, then she would have had like 6 weeks or so on it by then, and that may well have been okay for some horses. If it was one of the high flyers that things are going well for, then maybe we're not in too deep a water with that sort of horse for the day. For most horses, though, or if you're not going to get all that riding in, not really appropriate unless you're going to a colt starting clinic. So why? First thing is safety. You know, you're on a horse that hasn't seen the world much, isn't comfortable with you, doesn't have a clear pattern of what to expect yet, and you may have an isolated wreck at home, and you understand that, and you accept that risk or do what you can to mitigate that risk, and that's fine. You're adults, and you know, more power to you. But you have a wreck in the middle of 10 or 12 other people, and you cause 3 or 4 of their horses to go off, and now you have started a chain reaction of people that didn't accept that level of risk. And so it's not really fair to do something like that. Ideally, if you are going to kind of bring your horse to town for the first time, I wouldn't do that at a huge event if I could help it. I would rather do that with like 3 or 4 close friends who understand that I'm on a green horse and that they can help me or avoid me or whatever, and they're on horses that they trust and are comfortable with. So if I have a wreck, I'm not going to likely cause them to get into one as well, or they've at least got, you know, fair warning. If they're another trainer or something, then, you know, getting into a little wreck isn't going to ruin their day or whatever. They're used to that sort of stuff. I've had more people than I would have ever thought that have shown up to clinics with horses with like 10 rides, or they're trying a horse out to buy, and so they decided to bring it to a clinic. And you know, that etiquette wise, that's really not okay. That shouldn't be done. You are standing the chance of or running the risk of ruining other people's days because you're not in control, or things aren't going well for you, and you had no reasonable expectation that they would, and now you've ruined someone else's day or wasted their money or whatever. So that's not cool. That's not kosher. Now, again, exceptions. I've definitely had a lot of horses come. I mean, probably like a third of all of the horses I've done in colt starting clinics are actually restarts. So if you're bringing a horse with 8 rides to a colt starting clinic, well, everybody has that expectation now. That's not out of the realm of reality. Or if you had a problem horse clinic or something like that, once again, not out of the realm of reality. I would say, at least, if you are planning on doing something like that or wondering if you can do something like that, call the clinician. Ask, tell them what the situation is, give them the option to handle it how they want to handle it. Please do not just show up at a clinic or a ride with a bunch of other people on a horse that you have no reasonable expectation of being able to control. That is just plain not fair to everyone else. All right, the last thing I wanted to talk about, this wasn't really a question, this was more of an occurrence. I got a call from a lady that I had met at a summit, and she's a professional herself, and so we were, you know, struck up conversation, became friendly. She contacted me and said that a customer of hers had bought a horse traveling across country and had stopped in Baton Rouge at a facility that I'm very familiar with, and she had not been able to reload. She'd stayed overnight there. She hadn't been able to get the horse back in the trailer. Now she contacts me. It's about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Her customer had been trying to load this horse since 8 o'clock that morning, and of course had already enlisted some help, and a few people that had a crack at the horse. And as it so happened, this place was about an hour from me, and I said, well, you caught me on a good day. I'll head over there and see what I can do. So I drive over there, and we get there, and the horse really didn't seem to be, I'm expecting a hornet's nest when I show up. And they have the horse. I asked her, I said, if you've already done all that with him, just if you can, turn him loose in one of the paddocks and just let him chill out until I get there. And she did. When I got there, he was just walking around the paddock, and I went in there with him, and he came right up to me. He seemed pretty friendly, pretty gentle. So not the wild Mustang type. And we wound up backing the trailer up to the gate of the paddock. Always, you have a situation like that, use what you have in your environment to help you. You can be smart about things, or you can be foolish. And if you're going to try to load a horse that has those kind of problems in the middle of a parking lot, I would question whether your ego has overcome your good sense. So we back the trailer into the hole. I go to working with him, and sure enough, he starts just like any horse would. We kind of establish a line of where he's comfortable, and he'll stand quietly. I back off. We do advance and retreat. I'm getting him a couple feet closer each time. Before long, we've got him pawing into the trailer. I actually got him loaded about an hour and 15 minutes in, and as it turns out, there were two teenage girls that had come up. They're on the passenger side of the trailer, outside of the paddock. So from where I'm standing and loading the horse, I can't see them, and I know they were there. The horse can't see him, and he didn't know he was there until we get up in the trailer, and now we can see out of the window, and they're there talking. And so that set him off, that scared him, and he backed out, and that was probably we didn't make any progress for another 15 or 20 minutes after that. And then I got him loaded again and got him a little more comfortable in the trailer, and then I had the lady load him 3 or 4 times. So let's talk a little bit about trailer loading. It's basically just an obstacle. There are a lot of things you can practice at home that are trailer loading in essence. So if you have a bridge, a pedestal, even a tarp on the ground or something like that, and you get the horse to walk up on that, even though it may not be elevated or whatever, it is them putting their feet on a foreign object that's place specific. That's essentially what trailer loading is. Trailer loading simply then elevates that, where they have to step up. And so if you can get a horse to load onto a pedestal, onto a little bridge or something like that, you are essentially working on trailer loading. And the way that I approach that is I sort of make the trailer base. And so right thing easy, wrong thing difficult. If we're not near the trailer, we're working, and then we rest near the trailer. And if you rest there and you give me a calming signal or relaxation, I'll lead you away from the trailer, and we'll rest more further away, and then we'll approach again. And the trailer becomes like base. You're safe there. And before long, they'll be dragging you to the trailer. What you don't want to do, they had already done some of this stuff with this horse, is try to get like 2 people to lock arms and push the horse into the trailer. You may get the horse loaded, but you have added a ton of resistance into that animal and legitimate fear. They really have a reason to fear the trailer now because of what has happened there. And what winds up happening is you sort of coil a spring. You build anxiety, and that horse gets in the trailer, you slam the door, shut them in there, but they were never comfortable. And now they get more and more uncomfortable. And this is how you would, if you were to want to train a horse to come barreling out of a trailer as soon as you open the door, that's how you would do it. So every time you're loading the horse, you should also be working on unloading the horse. So when I do have a horse that's up in a trailer, front feet or hind feet, I like to use a little verbal cue. I say step. So whenever their feet are about to step down out of the trailer, I will start saying step, step, step. A few times they figure out that that's where that scary step down is, and I'm giving them a heads up. And I get some leadership points for that. They start to trust me a little bit more, even though I'm the mean guy that made them get in this loud, noisy contraption they didn't want to get into. So take your time, make sure the horse is comfortable. Always approach that. Like I knew when I got there, I'm going to get this horse loaded. But I had no expectation that I'm going to get him loaded in 20 minutes. Wasn't even something I would have tried, right? I figured within a couple hours I'll have the horse loaded. That's essentially what happened. But if it had taken me 3, 4, whatever, I'm not going to quit until I have the horse in the trailer. But furthermore, I'm going to make sure the horse is getting more comfortable throughout the process, not less. So a lot of times, like you may take an hour to load a horse. Well, 55 minutes of that, I don't have the horse in the trailer. But once the ice gets broken and they get in the trailer, then I can load him 8 times in the last 5 minutes. That's very often how this sort of stuff happens. So be patient, take the time it takes. Do not have an agenda. There are a lot of reasons in the real world where we need a horse to reliably load in a trailer reasonably quickly. If they get hurt, need to go to a vet, you can have natural disasters, certain parts of the country, forest fires, and those things can be on top of you, and you got an hour to get everything out, right? Well, you can't spend 2 hours loading that one horse in that instance, and you don't want to have to make that hard decision to leave one behind. We have hurricanes here in the south, same sort of deal. Sometimes you got to evacuate horses quickly. You may have to evacuate a bunch of them, and you need them all to load now. So one of the things that I like to do is, as a habit, whenever I'm riding young horses, once we kind of get past the time-consuming rides, so the first week, maybe 2 weeks with some horses, maybe more than that with others, but for most of them after the first week, when I end a ride, I'll have a halter right there, and I'll put it on. Usually I don't even unbridle the horse. I just put the halter over it, and I take him over. I keep a stock trailer out in the pasture right by the arena, kind of where my obstacle course area is. And we end the ride by loading in the trailer. And maybe that first day or two, if I have one that's not real good and reliable at loading, that might take me 20 minutes or 30 minutes to get them in the trailer. And then we loosen the saddle and we back out, and that's where the day ends. Well, by day 5 or 6 of doing that, that horse has come to learn that trailer's base. That's where this ride ends. That's where that saddle gets loosened up. That's where that bridle comes off. Ladies, this is like where you get to take that bra off at the end of the day, and it feels so wonderful. Or guys, pull your boots off and your feet feel better. You didn't even know how bad they were hurting until you took your boots off. It's kind of like giving that horse that experience, but associating it with the trailer. So, like I say, Monday maybe it takes me 20 minutes to load the horse in the trailer when I start this. By Friday, they're dragging me to the trailer to go hop in that thing, though. So, there's really not much of an excuse for having horses that don't load well. You should practice that stuff before it's time to need to do it. When you do need to do it, don't have an agenda, time crunch. Like even my most broke horses, I still let them every single time they walk up to the back of the trailer. I'll give them loose rope and let them sniff around a little bit. Most of my horses are going to be loaded within about 20 seconds. Almost none of them walk up and just jump in, though. They all want to sniff a little, want to investigate a little. I consider that perfectly fine. I have no desire to hurry that anymore. I think it's reasonable to let them sniff. Give them 20 seconds to load or whatever. If you want to do competitions where you have to trailer load like a ranch horse deal from 20 feet away or whatever, if I had that on my agenda, then I would probably change that a little bit. But for reality in my world, it doesn't matter. So that's a few thoughts on trailer load. It really can be the bane of some people's existence, but it shouldn't be. You're just trying to get the horse a little more comfortable. It's pressure and release. It's a great exercise to practice your timing of pressure and release, reading the horse, all of these things. And just treat it like another obstacle. You really can just put a tarp on the ground or a piece of plywood or something like that and practice trailer loading without a trailer at all. And it's well worth your time. Like I said, that little deal of getting a horse tired and loading them in the trailer and that's where they quit, that's a powerful association. And you just knock the rust off of it every so often and load them again after a ride, and you'll have horses that load well for the rest of their lives. All right, that's going to conclude this Q&A podcast. Again, I'll ask you to go ahead and give us a rating, a review, a comment, or whatever on if you're on a platform that allows it, like Apple Podcasts or something. They certainly do. If you don't know how to do that, where you have the heading at the top with the big picture and all, just hit that, and it gives you the drop-down list of all of the episodes. You scroll to the very bottom of that, and that's where you can do ratings, reviews, comments, and so forth. And again, I really would appreciate y'all doing that. And I think we've only got like 13 reviews on Apple Podcasts, and way more people are listening than have taken that time. So please do me the favor, take the time and help us out and spread the word. Tell your friends. We're going to have a bunch of new episodes. We've already got some great guests lined up. Like I said, the next episode will be Jack Blue, and then we've got Wes Taylor and Sean Cook. We've already done all those. I just have to edit them and release them. And we've got quite a few other people lined up for the year. Should be a lot of good, interesting interviews. Look to see y'all down the road at some expo or event, or maybe at a clinic. Always looking for new clinic hosts. So if you like what we're doing and how we talk about stuff and describe it, go to the website, send me an email, hit me up, and we'd love to do a clinic in your part of the world. We're having to kind of rebuild that since COVID shut the world down. And I've actually had several clinic hosts that were kind of up in age that are too old to want to do the headache of having clinics at their place and so forth. So we are looking to fill some more spots. So hit us up. We'd love to ride with you. Love to see you somewhere down the road. Thank y'all much. God bless and take care.
We'll see you next week for another episode of Adult Onset Horsemanship. I've been your host, Daniel Dolphin.